Well, hello guys, welcome to another Pressing In. My name's Jeremy, I'm one of the pastors here at Blue Ridge, and our goal here every week at Pressing In is to take what we're wrestling through, what we're talking about in this season, and talk about it with some leaders around Blue Ridge to be able to ask questions and look for how we can practically apply what we're learning and what we're experiencing throughout the rest of the week. One of the things we know and we've heard is how difficult relationships have been over this last season, specifically marriages. And I know not everyone is married, but Woody and Nan just celebrated their 51st wedding anniversary. And so we asked you all on social media, what were some of the questions you had about what it takes to have a, not just good marriage, but a great marriage for the long haul for 51 years. And we invited Josh and Abby, a young couple here at Blue Ridge who've been married about 3 years, to interview them and ask them some of their thoughts to what makes a great marriage. Take a listen.
I can remember when I first started serving here at Blue Ridge on the worship team, I actually was probably like 17 or 18. And I remember the first time you'd even called me by my name. I was like, oh my gosh, Woody knows who I am. This is really cool. So I have looked up to you guys for as far as I've known who you were. So we've been married for about three and a half years. Abby is a nurse, and I work on staff here at Blue Ridge. So it's been really cool to get to know you personally within the past 5 years. And then for Abby and I, to get to travel with you guys and go on, canoe adventures through the Rio Grande and Grand Canyon hiking adventures, and excited for the adventure coming up in a couple weeks to Colorado. So there we have a list of questions, and let's start with a fun one. If you guys were to categorize your life by the title of a movie or a song, what would that be?
The Notebook.
The Notebook.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my
yes.
I watched that movie years ago when it first came out, and then I talked about it so much, somebody actually gave me a copy of it. And so we watched. I said, "What do you need to watch this movie? This just is our story."
And I'm saying, do they blow up anything? Do they shoot anybody? I don't know why I would watch it.
It's kind of a chick flick, but
then I'm crying, Nan's crying.
Of course, I cry every time I watch it.
I have one movie downloaded on my computer, and it's The Notebook.
Really?
And I have for about 10 years, and Abby picks on me for it because she's not as big of a fan as I am. So how did you guys meet, and when was that?
Long time ago. We were a blind date. My best friend was dating his best friend, and they seemed to think we would be a good fit. So he showed up at my door. I was, 15? 15. And you were about 17. So.
My first and last blind date.
Mine too.
I always thought a blind date was something that when you met the girl, you were hoping you were blind.
Worked out for you, though.
but it really worked out. I remember standing on the front stoop at her house, and I had no idea what was coming. And when she opened the door, I said, I was kind of like Adam when he saw Eve. Whoa, man.
So at this point, 51 years later, what are some of the things that you guys have enjoyed doing together throughout the years, and what is it that you enjoy doing together nowadays?
Sex?
Cut that.
Cut that.
We enjoy travel.
Nan's like, never mind, it is my turn.
I'll take the mic back.
We like to travel. We like hiking and camping, and we like
mountain climbing.
Yep.
And adventure stuff.
Yep.
We enjoy. We have 3 categories of vacations, and we travel a fair amount. We don't have children, so we have been a lot of places in the world. We have Nan vacations. Tell them what a Nan vacation is.
A Nan vacation is where you go somewhere that's warm. There's an ocean that you can listen to. There's sand. You get to stay in a place that has a room with a bed in it. And then there's a private bathroom with hot water and a flush toilet and towels and sheets on the bed.
Say, how come we've never gotten to do a Nan vacation? How come when we travel with you, it's always cold, wet, and...
Yes.
Because you've gone on Woody vacations.
No, it's not a vacation. It's an adventure. Yeah. A Woody adventure is somewhere that's cold and it's
what Nan says is, Woody, I'm cold, wet, tired, hungry, and now I'm getting scared. This must be an adventure.
So it's kind of polar opposites.
Yeah. And then we have a third one in the middle, which is like traveling in Europe or wherever, where we do stay in hotels, B&Bs, whatever, yeah.
But we do a lot of walking. So it's both.
Okay, so what would be one of the most challenging seasons of your marriage?
Probably early on. We're very different personalities. He's very outgoing and adventurous, and I'm more of an introvert and came from different backgrounds, different types of families and all. And you know, when you first date, it's very exciting. He's everything I'm not, and I'm here to provide stability for him because he needs an admin kind of person. And so it's really neat. But the first few months of being married are fun and cool. But after a while, you get to where it's kind of like this. And so the first few years were difficult. But once you find your space, you become one flesh. And you're a lot stronger as a result.
Yeah, it was probably, in my memory, it's probably longer than a few years. It was probably a decade or 2 decades. Right. Now I've mentioned it recently, but we didn't open that divorce door. We just nailed it shut. But there were a lot of times when both of us would have rather been out of this miserable situation, this miserable relationship. There was a lot of selfishness on my part, which is at the root of most human misery.
So how did you guys push through those times? Like, is there anything practical, or was it just, I mean, you said that you never opened the divorce door. That would be an obvious one. Through those seasons, how did you guys just push through it?
Probably it would be a projection of that. I mean, for us, some people are less likely to tend towards selfishness and those kinds of things, or they just, they go along even keel. And so the backstop for us was that we did have a firm commitment to what God wanted us to do. And so we just clung doggedly to that. And sometimes I would say that was all that kept us together.
I think another thing for me is we always made it a habit to make up, apologize, to work things out before we went to bed at night. We just never went to bed with holding any kind of grudge against each other. And that helped us a lot to kind of sort things out.
I mean, God's really smart. When he says things like, don't let the sun go down on your anger, at least in the version I learned it. And that's not what I naturally wanted to do, what most people want to do. I mean, what I wanted to do was to roll over my side of the bed and make sure she knew that I was angry. But there's an act of the will where, both of us would turn toward each other, whether we felt like it or not. And those kinds of things forge bonds that are hard to break or harder to break. And I mean, there's other things, practices Nan's really been good at years ago, and we've used this as, rather than me just clamming up, to describe behavior, to describe your emotions. Well, I'll give you an example. Once, I remember coming home from a party, and Nan said to me, tonight, 2 times, 3 times, I was telling a story and you broke in and interrupted and corrected me. And it made me feel this small. Well, you see, she didn't just say you're a jerk, which I was, which would have caused me to be very defensive. But she described the behavior, I couldn't deny it, and she told me how it made her feel. I mean, the facts are right out there for you, and so deal with it.
One of the things that we've had a hard time figuring out is like, at what point do I need to bring this up? If there's something that's irritating me, is it a me problem? Is it an us problem? Is this actually something worth talking about? And I think one of the things that we discovered was like, if it gets to a point where I'm drawing a conclusion about your character, that's the point where we're like, have the hard conversation and like bring it up. And another thing that we've noticed is we are really productive when we're walking. and like mentally like engaged and all that stuff. So if we have to have like a hard conversation, usually it's like, hey, let's go on a walk.
Yeah.
And then it makes it like a lot easier to talk and work through problems when we're like doing something.
Yeah, I think every couple should have that kind of shorthand.
Yeah.
Let's go on a walk. And for us, I guess for me, it's that, is this just me? And honestly, if I will stop and pray about it, then God will oftentimes he will bring whatever impetus I need. The other thing that goes along with it is, does it keep coming up?
Yeah.
If it keeps coming up, then you need to deal with it. If it doesn't, it may just be my own native cussedness.
I feel like that's a good segue into another question was like, what are practices that you feel like you guys have put into place that have helped strengthen your marriage? And I feel like that kind of answers that a little bit, but is there anything else that you would say have been intentionally done to try to make your marriage stronger?
Well, for me, something that was pivotal in my relationship with Woody was, for years I would pray, God, will you make him this man, this, and I had my list of what I wanted him to be, and suddenly it occurred to me, no, he should be what you want him to be, God, not what I want him to be. And when I started praying that he would be what God wanted him to be, and that I would become what God wanted me to be, we would become closer to God, but closer to each other, which, I mean, within a few months of when I started praying like that, things began to change in our relationship, and it was pivotal. So I would recommend anybody who's married, pray for your husband, your wife, to be the godly person that God wants them to be.
Yeah. And just praying together. I mean, I'm amazed, frankly, at the number of, in my case, men I know, that when I ask them, do you pray with your wife? They'll say no. And there's something intimate about prayer, something self-revealing about prayer. Yeah. And oftentimes people, they overhear you saying things that you haven't even said to them. If you're being honest in your prayer, if you're not posing and keeping your facade up.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really critical. Something else that's been important for us that I've really appreciated, I mean, for example, when we came back here to Virginia after I finished seminary, because I never really wanted to be a pastor or whatever. They just asked if we'd come back and do it temporarily, which we did for 15 years. And so we came back here, and Nan got a job as a temporary worker at a large company here in Lynchburg. And in 10 years, she's the highest reporting woman in her division. She was in Richmond or wherever and getting an award for the United States Senate Productivity Award for companies that size. All of that to say, the Bible talks about respecting your husband and loving your wife. And while she's talked to larger crowds than I have, she's been very successful. She has always been very willingly careful to say, I respect you. And it's the beautiful thing about it is that when she would respect me, then I would be freer and feel more like loving her. Mm-hmm. And the more I loved her, the more she could trust me, and the more she could trust me, the more I loved her. And it's an upward spiral. Now, we all know what the downward spiral is. Yeah. And frankly, it's not the only answer, but as I talk with couples, almost always I can trace it back to, in some way the wife is not feeling loved, in some way the husband's not feeling respected. And if you uncover that a little bit, you'll find out that God knew exactly what he was talking about. So that's been huge for us.
Yeah, I feel like we've even seen that too. And we've even talked about that because like we've had conversations where I'm like, I have never, I mean, we've been together for 5 years, married for 3.5, and I have never felt disrespected by Abby.
So someone asked the question of, in the midst of challenging situations, arguments, difficult times, how have you guys found ways to love the other person that go against probably your desire? You know, like what are things that you have been able to do, or times you've been intentional to like put someone before yourself? Or has there been a time that that's been the case where you've had to do that out of knowing what's right versus feeling what you want to do?
Well, that's a tough one.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things is roll to the middle. That is, do what you feel like not doing. And after a while, you almost make that a principle. Then it's an act of the will to speak the truth in love, or certainly to speak the truth. And it may not be an emotional love, but you can do it in a way that is helpful and revealing. You know this is not going well, so move toward it. And Nan's been really, as I've said, she's been really good about that.
It's making me look a lot better than I really am. But, at night, I think our policy of trying to work things out, sort it out before we go to sleep at night is huge. Because that way, after you go to sleep, I know we tend to snuggle, and you wake up in the morning and everything's all better. So.
And another thing Nan talks about, I think it's helpful, she calls it her love bucket. And just tell them how that works, what it is.
For me, when Woody does something sweet or kind or loving,
which is fairly unusual.
It's not. You make you sound, you're a lot better than you say you are. It fills up my love bucket. And so when my love bucket is full and we have a little argument, it just takes a little bit out of that bucket. And it doesn't really take long for it to fill back up. But in the early days, that bucket was just a little bit in there. And so it didn't take much to make us really feel badly about the situation or about each other. So having a full love bucket, just make sure it stays full. So when you do have these little disagreements, which will happen, there's no perfect marriage, it just takes a little bit out. That helps me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wise.
That's cool. How are you most challenged towards growth by each other?
Well, for me, Woody is my hero. He's strong. He's smart. He's a godly man. He runs after Jesus, and he mentors guys. I mean, I want to be like him when I grow up. And he's such a hero for me that it's not hard to respect him. And so, I want what he has, and he loves me. So, I mean, the love and respect thing is mutual.
I've used the illustration of the triangle, and Nan talked about it a little earlier. The shortest distance between 2 points, in this case, is not a straight line, because we tend to work, here's the wife, here's the husband, and as there's a problem, then they tend to move toward each other, try to move toward each other. But the fact is, as they move toward God, then they move toward each other.
Yeah.
And so it sounds indirect, and it's not what people want to hear, because their immediate pain is right here. You need, and I need, to be changed from the inside out. And only God can do that.
Yeah.
And marriage will rub you raw in all of those sensitive places. And in fact, God obviously is using it to shape us. So for me, it is really, really, really important. It's not just some religious platitude, but if you focus on moving toward God, you will wake up one day and find that you've moved closer to your spouse.
I can see how that is a very life-changing perspective, because if you're moving towards Jesus, who is an unchanging subject, an unchanging target, then you've got the perfect inspiration to aim towards.
And as you move toward him, it goes without saying, you are being changed.
So back when we first became engaged, I think we both did this without even knowing that we were doing it. I was asking basically everyone that I respected advice about marriage. I talked to my dad. I talked to some of the other worship leaders here at Blue Ridge. I was out, traveling internationally with Dave Kuntz and with Shay, and asking them, and just asking everyone pretty much the same question, which is, if you could give one piece of advice, what would it be as I'm going into marriage? I mean, we're 3 years in, and I still want to know the answer, because it's I guess at some level we would still be considered newlyweds, but what would be some advice that you would give early on?
Well, my thought may be for someone before they get engaged, and that is to take a whitewater canoe trip because you will turn over, and how you respond to the person on the other end of the boat will tell you a lot about them and may make you decide whether you really want to go forward with engagement or marriage.
And so you suggest doing that before you're married, because if you do it right when you get married, then it's just like, you might learn something you don't want to know.
Yes, exactly.
Don't do it right after you get married.
No.
This could be a dangerous.
Don't do it on your honeymoon.
One thing that you said would be that you did is important. That is, there's Proverbs, in the Old Testament says, in many counselors there's victory. Mm-hmm. And when you ask other people, what do you think of this match? And frankly, in my experience, generally people, they go with their emotions. And I think it's good that you want to be in love with somebody, but you can be in love, quote unquote, with the wrong person. Mm-hmm. And so if you have several people who tell you, I'm not really comfortable with this, you will probably, as Benjamin Franklin said, you marry in haste, you'll repent at leisure. And so I think that one of the most important things, though, is in Matthew chapter 6, every day has enough evil of its own. And God says, you got all you can do to keep your hand in my hand today. But if you do that, wherever you end up tomorrow, your hand will be in my hand, and you'll be okay. And so for me, trying to figure it out on your own is a fool's errand.
Yeah.
It is to listen first to God. It is to move toward God. It is to pray to God. God, if this isn't the right thing, and then listen to him if he tells you. If you do that, and you have people that you trust, whose marriage or whose judgment or whose advice you trust, I would say that would be preparatory.
Yeah.
So a very practical question that I feel like a lot of people probably feel right now with like people working from home and COVID, and how have you guys found a good like work-life balance? Obviously you work together, mm-hmm. but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have quality time, mm-hmm. together. And Josh and I have definitely realized that when we're missing the quality time with each other, other things become more stressful and more annoying because mm-hmm. That's what we actually mm-hmm. need at the root of the issue. Yeah. So how have you guys learned to kind of balance those two things?
We do work together, but we don't. And we just make sure that we are spending time away from work together. These for different people, it will be different things. What relaxes you? What do you enjoy? And we enjoy like the travel and climbing mountains and stuff like that. And then finding out some things that fill you up together. I really appreciate it. Nan is not naturally an outdoors person. And I'm not naturally lay on the beach person. But as I've said to them, I would enjoy going, if I hated it, just watching how much she enjoys it. But the fact is, you don't hate it then. We enjoy doing things together, and Nan has been so good about that.
And they're things we do every few months. We may take a little trip. It might just be a long weekend, or it might be overseas. But we enjoy doing that. And then maybe on a pretty afternoon, we'll just take a walk around the lake. We live in a townhouse community, and they have a lake, so we get to walk around that a little bit.
So kind of as the last question that we saw submitted was, what would be something you would say to encourage marriages that are on the brink of ending or just in a really rough place?
I would say don't do it. Don't end it. Even though it's hard, it's maybe everything you want to do right now is just to get away and not be married to that person anymore. But think about what is best for yourselves and for your family. I mean, especially if you have kids. That is the hardest thing for kids to deal with is divorced parents. And your Heavenly Father as well. I mean, he doesn't like divorce. So just take that word out of vocabulary and do whatever you can to fix it. Go get some counseling, find an older couple and have them spend some time with you, mentor you. But please don't do that. That's the worst thing you can possibly do.
And for me, in Revelation chapter 3, I think it is, 2 or 3, John is listening to the responses or the addresses to the 7 churches. And one of them is, this I have against you, you've lost your first love. And what he tells the church to do is to remember where you came from, go back and do the things you did at the first. That's the way you restore lost love. What did you do when you were first in love, when you were falling in love? And then do those things again. probably the first thing I would want to know is, what is your relationship with Jesus? And do you want to follow him? And if you do, he has something to say to you. And then you doggedly pursue him and pursue it. What we feel is what we do. And that we don't do it unless we think it's really, unless we're excited about it. But ultimately, it's not your feelings. And the good news is that you are just as likely to act yourself into a way of thinking as you are to think yourself into a way of acting. As you treat a person as if they're important and as if you love them, you say, well, that's kind of hypocritical. No. Hypocritical is when you get up in the morning and you go to work and you don't feel like going to work. And you get to work and you say, I am so happy to be here, I just love, that's hypocritical. Getting up in the morning and going to work when you don't feel like it, that's just maturity. And so you can act yourself into this way of thinking, and you're not subject to just the way you feel or you don't feel. Romans 5:8. God demonstrated his love towards us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. We sacrifice for the other person because Jesus sacrificed for us. And when we do, then the love of Christ will not only fill our hearts, but overflow onto the people around us, including your spouse. And that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us.
One of our core values around here is relationships. So I want to encourage you, trying to navigate this difficult season, specifically in the context of marriage, can be extremely tough. So here's what I encourage you to do. We have a lot of groups that you can be a part of here at Blue Ridge. Care groups, life groups, all sorts. Would you go on our website and would you get connected as maybe a practical next step to start walking with other people in this season as you try to navigate your relationships both at home and everywhere else in our life. Have a great one, guys. We miss you. We love you. Hope to see you here this coming Sunday at New London and our Bedford campus.